Okay, I want to officially welcome everyone, both live here in Nashville with us in the room and at all of the locations across the Pinnacle footprint. I am Brian Manning. I'm a financial advisor here, and we are thrilled that y'all are here today for our Lunch and Learn with Ken Coleman. We are a values-driven company, and for us, what that means is that as we make decisions about things like events we're doing today, we try to run them through our 7 values. And so today, we feel like we're delivering on our value of learning. We hope that when you walk out of here, you've got some content that you can immediately apply to life, to business, to relationships, and that type of thing, but also that you connect with some people that are here. We love doing these, that you can get some really valuable content that you can apply immediately, but also connect with other business owners and people that are leaders in businesses so that hopefully you can contact each other and continue to walk out the journey. We are thrilled that you're here because our brand is distinctive service and effective advice, and we feel like these deliver on that brand. So hopefully you're walking away with some really good stuff today. A quick note about questions and answers. This is specific for all of our locations that are watching live via the stream. At the end of Ken's talk, we'll open it up for questions and answers. And the way we'll do that is we'll take any questions here in the live audience first. And if you have a question or if you've got something that you would like for Ken to talk about at the end in all of our locations, if you'll just let your host know, they will email us and we'll build a queue. And then once we're done here in the room with any questions that anybody has here, then we'll build a queue and we'll address you directly. So if you'll just let your host know, they'll let us know, and then we'll call on you. It is my pleasure to introduce my friend and Pinnacle client to you today, Ken Coleman. Ken is a national radio host and a #1 best-selling author. He provides a lot of guidance in the world of business, but specifically with careers. And it's going to be cool for us today because the recent book that he wrote is called The Proximity Principle, and it's about helping you get where you want to be in your career. But for us today, he's going to spin that a little bit for us and help us get our businesses where we would like them to be through the power of relationships, which I think is a really applicable, helpful topic. So in addition to being a national radio host and a best-selling author, Ken's also husband to Stacy and dad to Ty, Chase, and Josie. And he's a friend of mine, and I'm thrilled that he's here. So I'll ask you to join me in welcoming Ken Coleman.
Thank you, thank you. How's everybody doing here in the live room? Good? Yeah, it's very nice. Is this the camera here, Brian, on my right? So this is cool. I'm a guy who very used to the camera, done a lot on camera, and so I wanted to acknowledge some people out there real quick, all right? Then I'll look at you most of the rest of the day, but I'll also look over here some. Brian was telling me how many locations are tuning in, and I asked him where. So I got to do a real special shout-out to the Roanoke, Virginia location. I got some family in Roanoke. And I'm a Virginian, so that's really cool. And then High Point, North Carolina, and Charlotte, North Carolina. My wife was born in High Point, still has a lot of family there, and then she grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. So waving at you, excited. For the rest of you, if I didn't call your name out, please pay attention. No hate towards anybody else, just wanted to give some love to those locations. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to dive into something very, very practical, and then we'll open it up for questions. But I want to give you some context before we dive in because it's really important because you've got the book in front of you entitled The Proximity Principle. I'm going to teach out of the Proximity Principle today, but I'm not teaching out of this book per se. The Proximity Principle, what is it? That's what you're thinking. At least that's what you should be thinking, so we'll define it. The Proximity Principle says, in order to do what I want to do, I've got to be around people that are doing it and in places where it is happening. So you break that down, very simple, right? Nothing crazy about this. This isn't even an original thought of mine. Just I gave it a different name. But let's break the principle down to a formula, and then we apply it to you and to all of you as not just leaders, businessmen, business ladies, but also just from a personal and professional growth standpoint as well. So this is good for you and your team. So here's the formula. People plus places equals opportunity. If I was going to go further, I would say the right people plus the right places equals opportunity. And so that's what we're going to break down today. So I have a limited time, and so I decided I'm going to highlight 2 specific people that matter to this group. and then 2 places that matter to you, and make sure that you see how powerful they are, okay? Before we dive into it, just a quick poll of the room in here. I can't see the hands out there. How many of you are in some type of a leadership position? You're leading 1 or 2 people minimum. Okay, just about everybody. How many of you are where you want to be? You're at the top of the ladder, and you can't, nor do you want to accomplish anything more in your professional or personal life? Okay, great. One of these times, Brian, I'm going to get somebody to raise their hand, and I'm going to crack on them so hard. Because obviously that would be a really bad position to take. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about 2 specific people and 2 specific places. But before we dive into the 2 people, I want everybody, and if you are taking notes, you can write this down. Why are people so important? Well, people affect us in 2 key ways. Number 1, they can change our perspective, right? And they can also change our position, or in other words, improve our position. So the right people, okay, can change our perspective, the way we see the world. It's almost like, I had a mentor share with me one time, it's the idea of changing your perspective is like putting on different glasses. Okay? It's a completely different way of looking at the world. And certainly in a leadership role, and then as a human who wants to become the best that you can be, this idea of making sure that you're around the right people will always give you a different perspective. That doesn't mean it's going to change your opinion, but it certainly can give you a different perspective, right? And I think we can all say in 2019 it would be great if we all just had a little different perspective, okay? We don't have to agree with everybody, but it sure would be nice to be able to sit down with people and learn from them and see things from a different perspective. So those are the 2 things. The right people will change your perspective and improve your position. What is the research on this? I did some research when we wrote this book. Harvard has a very famous study on relationships, the power of relationships. And it's over 75 years old, and they keep iterating on it and keep updating it. And one of the leaders of the study is a guy named Dr. David McClellan. And he found that the people that you habitually associate, I want to say this right, determines 95% of your success or failure. So let's just break that down for a second. When they say, "Hi, how are you?" "Hey, I saw you in church. I sat next to her in church. Come over." This is amazing. I got to give you. It took me a second. I was like, "You look familiar," but I was in the zone. So forgive me for not recognizing you right away. I'm not kidding you. I don't know if any of you go to church, but when the pastor says, "All right, let's turn around and shake 3 hands," this lady was on my left. It's fantastic. And she goes, "I know you. You're speaking for us." So it all comes full circle. Okay, so let's break the statement down. Let's look at the data. The people you habitually associate with, so the way I'd say that is the people you're doing life with, okay? And think of this not just in your personal context, but your professional context. Because we know from data that the average American will spend 90,000 plus hours at work in their lifetime. So let's talk about sleeping and work. That's the majority of our lives. So understand we're talking about you're spending a lot of time with the people you work with. Okay? So you think of the people that you're spending the most time with, they are responsible for 95% of your success or failure. Uh-oh. So we get this, right? Here's what's interesting. I've got 3 kids. And any parents in the room? Parents all around. Okay. So what's funny is we would never say to our kids, "Hey, listen, I really want you to hang out with the troublemakers." Would we? You'd never say that. You'd never say, "Find the 3 biggest losers in your school and spend time with them." Like, you're laughing because it's so absurd. Okay? You wouldn't say, "Find the 3 most negative people in the school, the gossip girls or whatever. Gossip guys, for that matter," right? You wouldn't say that. But what's interesting is we don't guard our own relationships that way at times. We'll find ourselves literally spending time with, could be a guy from high school or a gal, maybe your old college roommate, and you love her or you love him, but you know that they just kind of drag you down. When you're around them, they just drag you down. And so this is really important to understand. Wait a second. We wouldn't parent this way, then why are we acting this way? Why are we not more careful with the people we spend time with, okay? So let's break down. The first person is the producer. You can write this down. Producer. Now, this person is in the book, and this is really important for men and women that are in this room and all around the region, Because you're here for one reason. You want to grow. That's why you're here. You're here not for the free lunch, or you may have paid for it, I don't know. But you're here because you want to grow. And so let's talk about producers. So how do we define producers? Very simple. Producers are high achievers in their profession. That's simple. That's what we mean by a producer. They're producing positive results. So I want you, as I'm teaching this, I want you to begin to think, who are some high producers that you know in your close personal circle or in your acquaintance network? And you want to be thinking high performers. It doesn't matter if it's in the banking sector, real estate sector. It doesn't matter if it's in your specific sector. We just want to be thinking, who are some men and women that I know are absolutely crushing it professionally? And are you spending time with them? Are you being intentional to say, hey, I'd like to buy your lunch? Now, why are you doing this? 4 reasons, okay? Write these things down. You want to learn these 4 things from producers. Number 1, you want to get their insight. Their insight on trends, their insight on your particular situation. Maybe you've got a situation professionally, you've got a fork in the road, or you've got a difficult leader, or you've got some difficult people on your team. Whatever is a challenge that you might be facing, when you sit down with other producers and say, hey, I want to run this by you, here's my scenario, and I want to get your insight, all right? It's a fancy word for I want to get your knowledge and wisdom on this situation. That's really helpful. So insight's the first thing you learn from producers. Second thing, their best practices. They're winning. So essentially you're sitting down with them going, I'd love to know why you're winning. I want to know why you're winning. So you want to know their best practice. Third thing, their resources and rhythms for learning. Their resource. So the best practices is kind of if they're in a leadership role or they're in a similar role as you. You're looking for best practices in that specific area. But then you're looking for, okay, I want to get outside of the professional practices, and I want to look at your personal growth. And so you're looking for their rhythms and their resources. So what do I mean by that? So one of the things I get to do is I'm in this rare world where I'm on talk radio, I'm nationally syndicated, I'm an author, and so I get invited to things. And so I just accepted a speaking event sometime next month in Indianapolis, and there's a couple of heavy hitters on the docket with me. Now, I'm just going to tell you, the first thing I did once they signed the contract, I had the guy who books my speak, I said, ask them when this speaker, and this speaker is going to be there. Because they're speaking before me. Because I want to be in the green room when they get there, not to get a picture with them. That's all nice. But we're peers. I want to get in there, say hi to them real quick, and I'm going to have 1 or 2 questions for each of these people. I'm just telling you, that's how I'm wired. That's what I'm talking about. So I get the opportunity to be in a situation where now they're in a different world, so because we're all busy and we're doing our thing, I don't get to bounce around with a lot of other high-producing content people. I meet them from time to time. So the questions that I could ask, and I could learn something from each one of you in this room and then watching from around the region, but I have some unique things that I could ask them. So I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to ask about their rhythms. What's your morning like? You work out? What are you doing there? What's the latest nutrition thing? Because I'm just telling you, high performers have rhythms. They do things on purpose. It's not by chance. You know this. So I want to know their rhythms. And then I want to know resources. What books are you reading? You listen to any podcasts you get excited about? Those are the first 2 questions I'll ask each of those speakers. Because because they've got their own personal growth plan. They've got their own goals. And I can learn from them. So that's the third thing. That's what I mean by resources and rhythms. And then finally, their connections. I mean, this is huge. Connections are what make the world go round. Now, there's a term out there called networking, and I hate it, and you probably hate it too. Is there anybody in here that loves going to networking events? We're not going to shame you. Do you really? You're like the rare dude, because I'm an extrovert off the charts, and if you say networking event, my skin crawls, right? Right? It feels gross. Here's why. I remember the first time I went to a networking event in broadcasting when I was trying to get started 9 years ago. And I walked into this thing, and I had my name tag on. I just got my name tag. And I start to walk into the group. And this guy lights up when he sees me. I'm an absolute nobody, but he looks as though he's excited to see me. To the point that I looked over my shoulder, right and left. Is this guy looking at me? He's very excited to see me, and I don't know why he would be excited to see me, but he's excited to see me. So he comes up to me, and he's all over me. And I mean, I am the most interesting person on the planet for about 17 seconds. Because he says, hey, what's your name? And I say, Ken. And he says, what do you do? And I start telling him, I'm in my lowly status here, right? Ran my own company. I'm trying to break into broadcasting. And he assessed pretty quickly that I could do nothing for him. And then he was looking over my shoulder. Okay? That's that gross feeling. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. Because at a networking event, I know you love them, and I'm sure good things happen for you, but it's a little bit like playing the lottery because everybody's there for themselves. Versus what I'm going to be teaching today and what I'm talking about right now, when you get around other producers over coffee and over lunch, that's a connection. And one of the things I hear on my show all the time, people will call in the show. I have a daily radio show, and it's a caller-driven show. And they'll say, Ken, I want to talk to these producers, but I don't have anything to offer them. And that's not true. What I'm teaching today will bring tremendous value to the people you want to sit down with because of one reason. Every human being on the planet loves to give their opinion. They love it. I don't know if many of you used to watch The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Of course, I think Jimmy Kimmel does it now. But we've all seen these night shows, these late night shows, where they just take a producer and a microphone out on the street. If I went down on the streets of Nashville right now with a camera and a microphone, I'd find tons of people who would be happy to talk to me. They'd see a camera. It's right here. And I could ask them the most off-the-wall questions in the world, and they would answer them. Why? There's something about the human condition that we love giving our opinion. Now imagine asking a high-level producer, even if you don't know them personally, but you have a connection with them, right? My friend Barry said, I should call you, that you'd be willing to hang, and here's what I'd love to do. I'd love to just come and buy your coffee, have lunch, and ask you some questions. I just want to get your insight. Go through those 4 things. These are 4 things I'd like to get from you. Are you kidding me? Unless they're a complete jerk, and there are those, most people are going to say yes to that because they love sharing their own opinion. They love sharing about their journey. Certainly high-producing people. They know they're winning. It's not an accident. So that's what we're looking for, those 4 things. Just to review real quick, you're looking for their insight. That's on your situation. Best practices, your situation. Resources and rhythm for learning. That's just learning what's working for them in their growth and in their connections. My favorite story to illustrate this is that we forget that high producers are really intentional. I think we just think, because in this media culture, we just see them winning. And so what's splashed before our eyes on social media and on television is just them winning. And we don't see what's going on behind the scenes, right? And I want to go way, way, way back because I'm talking to high producers today. And I want to tell you a story of this, like producers hanging with producers and what that produces. So I think 2 of the greatest writers of all time, J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. Nobody's going to debate me. Everybody know who those names are, right? We know those names. So what you may not know is that Tolkien was much younger than Lewis. And they met in England around the time that C.S. Lewis was a professor at a university there. And so, as the legend goes, and this is all true, it's in a story, it's in a book entitled The Inklings, which is a fascinating read. So Tolkien shows up one day after meeting Lewis, and he shows up at his office on campus, knocks on the door. And Lewis opens the door, and it was Lewis's habit mid-morning. This is also fantastic if you're a beer drinker. He would drink beer while he was working. And so he opens up the door, and he's got a pint in his hand, and there's young Tolkien there. And he says, hey, I just want to hang out with you. And thus began a multi-year relationship where every Monday morning, Tolkien would show up at Lewis's office. They would have beer together, and they would talk about writing. And at times that they would just talk about stuff that dudes talk about. Who knows? Life, business, writing, who knows? They so fell in love with the process of the intentional connection that they then decided to take it up a notch. And Lewis would invite a group of 30 to 40 artists, okay, literally painters, poets, some of the great writers of all time, really, and they all came together. But it was Lewis and Tolkien that started this deal. And the process would be that they would get everybody in the room, cigars, pipes, beer, the whole 9 yards, and then Lewis would say something to the effect of, all right, who wants to read first? Or who wants to present first? And then in this very chilled out gathering, much like right now, one of them would start reading a page from their latest poem or a chapter. And it was in those gatherings where Lewis introduced the idea of Narnia. And Tolkien thought it was ridiculous, right? And they would challenge each other and push each other and change the way they would write. And they would do all these things. But the idea is that everybody was there for one reason. We know that everybody in this room is a high-level producer and getting after it and cares about excellence. And so we're going to bounce things off that room. Now, that's a big difference between hanging out with all your college buddies that are negative. They're just living for the weekend. They don't care about anything specifically. They may care about you. We'll give them that. But if you're taking big ideas, you're taking big problems, unique challenges to people who aren't high producers, you're going to get really bad feedback. You might get no feedback at all. You might not get engagement. And then what does that do to the spirit? But imagine coming in, even with all the nerves there. It wasn't fun for Lewis. He writes about it. He hated the process, but he kept doing it because they would tear each other's writing apart. All of them. You know, they'd look at something, this abstract idea or a painting, and they would all weigh in on it. On some levels, that's nerve-wracking. But what he said is the outcome of the feedback and of the association, for one other major reason, they encouraged each other when one of them was going through a down period of writer's block, or they didn't feel like their stuff was working, or they weren't inspired. So it's not just feedback, it's also inspiration, it's community. And here's the deal. Most men and women in a professional setting in America right now don't do any of this. You might go have beers after work. There's nothing wrong with beers and community and all that. That's all great. But you aren't intentionally diving deep. And just because you're in banking or healthcare or whatever the industry is, you don't have to be creating words and ideas and concepts to have the same effect. So that's the first group of people, the producer. Let's move on. Now we're going to talk about peers. Jim Rohn, the legendary personal growth guru, said one time, and I think he's absolutely right, we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. Now, we've been talking about this non-personal relationship with producers. Now, if you have a personal relationship, great. But that first person, that producer, may be somebody you don't know at all or know very well. But now when we talk about peers for a moment, this is vital because these are the men and women that you're spending the most time with. And I don't mean just being in the same room with them. I mean engaged. So there's 2 types of peers. The professional peer, you got a really good friend at work. Maybe you do something on the side every once in a while, but largely they're just a really good friend or coworker or teammate that you have a legitimate relationship with. That's the professional peer. The personal peer, we all understand this. My wife and I, Stacy, we have 3 kids, 13, 11, and 10. So we have limited time. I didn't mention the 2 doodles, right? So you throw all that in there. Everybody's busy. So who are our peers? These are couples that we're choosing to go to dinner with or we're choosing to spend some time with. And so you have limited time, which means that number of people, true peers, that you're doing life with is a small number. Now, I step on toes when I talk about this, but the reality is you got to think for a second. What do those peers, what do they do to me when I'm around them? I didn't say do for me. That's a nasty, ugly relationship. I didn't say do for you, but what do they do to you? Do you feel a sense of rest when you spend time with them? Do you feel rejuvenated? Is it fun? Or, let's look at the verse, is it, well, we do it out of duty. We kind of know them. They ask us, and we don't have the guts to come up with an excuse, or we don't come up with some way to say no in a nice way, and so we say yes. We keep hanging out with them, and their kids drive us crazy. I'm exhausted emotionally after I hang out with them. I always feel like I'm here when we get with them, and then when we're done, I always feel down here. Or I feel like I can't talk about the good things in my life. I can't share the victories in life. Now, you have to truly run through your mind, what's going on? What's the emotional and physiological response when I'm spending time with people? that I'm spending a lot of time with. These are my peers. Like, what's it like? Are they dragging me down? I got a call the other day this guy was racked with tension as soon as he started the call. And he said, man, I just need your perspective. I know what I'm supposed to do, but I need your perspective, Ken. And I said, okay, what is it? He goes, I know that my wife and I are supposed to move to California. We live in Kentucky right now. We're supposed to move to California because she has got a dream job offer. I can do my work from anywhere. And it's just a no-brainer, but our family is holding us back. They're criticizing us. They're making us feel very uncomfortable that we're even considering this move. Now, this is a tough situation because now we're talking about family. And I would include family members in this peer that I'm talking about. So what's going on? The guy went to detail the whole thing out, and I just listened. I said, here's the deal. Do you want to move to California? He goes, absolutely. I said, does your wife want to move to California? He says, absolutely. I said, okay, is it your life and her life together as a couple, or are you trying to live a life that makes her mom and dad and the rest of the family happy? And he starts laughing because it's just so obvious. He's like, yeah, can you make it sound so simple? It's not that easy. I said, I didn't say it was easy. I'm saying it's clear. And so at some point, we have got to decide, am I willing to make my close friends and family uncomfortable in order to lead the life and live the life that I'm supposed to live? Either you're coming with me or not. And understand, I'm not telling you to divorce your family. What I'm saying is we got to sit down with family and go, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is why I'm supposed to do it. Right? This is what we're doing, why we're doing it. And it's because we're going here. And here's what happens when family and friends, now that's an illustration, but family and friends, when they hold us back, here's what's going on. You deciding to move forward, spend the extra time in personal growth, do this, whatever it is. You deciding to move forward is reminding them that they have A, no plan, B, don't know their purpose, C, they've failed and they refuse to come back out of the cave. Okay? I could go on, D, E, F, G, all the way down the line. What it is you deciding to be purposeful and move forward in your life is reminding them that they're not. And it feels very personal. And they make up excuses. Well, we're a close-knit family. We want you here. Or your friends will say, oh, you think you're too good for us now. And they start to guilt us. And we've got to have the maturity to go, wait a second. I've got one life. It moves very, very quickly. I want to be on purpose. And so in order for me to move up in my company or get the leadership position that I want or get the most out of this team, I may have to separate myself from you. Now, you can come with us, and if you want to come with us, this is where we're going, how we're going, and why we're going. And this is a leadership context as well. You can like some people on your team a lot. You can have a real emotional connection with them. But if this is where we're going and they don't want to make the trip, it's not on you. It's not on you. So bringing this back around to the peers. I mean, if you just hang around with people that are bringing you down, you got to say, hey, I can't do that anymore. I'm not going to gossip anymore. I'm tired of talking about all the negative things that have happened in your life when I'm around you. Listen, I want to help you. I want to be here for you. But I can't talk about this all the time. You're literally sucking the life out of me. And this is what I want to do to help you. This is what I want to talk about. This is why. And if they're not cool with that, it's not you breaking up with them. That's what we think. Oh, I'm such a bad person. I just can't break up with them. No, what's happening is you're walking forward and they're staying put. That's the difference. So let's talk about the type of professional and personal peers. 3 characteristics. Number 1, people who push you. People who naturally push you. They're people who are on their own pace, and they're excited about you. They're interested in you. When they talk to you, they're the type of person that's going to push you intentionally, or they just naturally set a pace where you go, oh, I like that. When I trained for the half marathon last year, Brian and I would have lunch, and he's a marathoner multiple times. He's much more of a man than I am, and he knew this was a one and done. And I remember having lunch with you in Cool Springs, and I was telling him about the training, and this is an example of somebody that will push you. So I knew that I had to have some extra help, and we have a mutual friend. He's my best friend, a guy named Bill. and he's done triathlons. He's a maniac. And I had 12 weeks to get from couch to the half marathon, which is insane. Okay, but Dave Ramsey challenged me in front of 900 people, so I had to do it. So I said to my buddy Bill, I said, listen, I need you to train me. Number one, I won't do it if I don't have somebody that's in my face making me do it. Number two, would you be willing to run with me early on as I'm trying to really get my body in that kind of running shape? And he said, absolutely. And every time I ran with Bill, Brian, I found that I ran faster because he is in better shape. He's a more experienced runner, so technique matters, all that stuff. And when I'm running with Bill or another guy by the name of Daniel, when I ran with those guys, I had a quicker pace because they naturally had a quicker pace. They weren't trying to pull a trick on me, but I would run with them. That's the idea here. You want to hang out with peers who just, whether they push you intentionally to say, hey, Ken, what are you doing to grow? You know, what's your growth plan personally? What's your salary growth plan? What are you trying to do? Where are you trying to save? Where are you trying to take your family? What's your growth plan? Push, 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 push all the time. And if they're not going to do that way, they do it by modeling. They're just, when you start talking to them, they're always got a new goal. They got a new thing. They're taking new ground. And so by hanging with them, what will happen is, like my buddies on the road, they just naturally had a quicker pace. And if I was by myself, I would have slowed it down a little bit. But because I wanted to hang with my buddies who are good runners, I had a faster time. We get that. So number one, push you. Number two, hang around with peers who lift you. This is huge. This is huge. So many people in life are essentially running the race on their own. I'll never forget a powerful image. If you search it, if you just search on the internet, YouTube or Google, father coming to help his son finish the race. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen it. And this Olympic runner is literally trying to finish the race, and his body has given out on him. How many of you ever feel like that? Feel like times that you just can't get through the day, can't get through the week, a lot of pressure, and you just feel like my legs are going to give out. And I'll never forget it. This father, and this is not like the overbearing father. You know, this is the father who sees his son and sees his son struggling. He's like, he's not going to make it, and I'm going to come out there, and I'm going to be his dad, and I'm going to jump in this last 20 yards or whatever it was. And he comes out, and he literally just puts his arm around his son this way and his left hand in, and he just let the son keep going at that pace, but he just steadied him. He lifted him because his son was about to fall down, and in falling down would not have finished the race. And his dad steps out. And you watch that, and I don't know how you don't cry. You know, it's just an unbelievable act of love. But that's what I'm talking about, to have peers that you're so close with and so in tune with. They know your goals, you know their goals, and you can call them and you can say, hey, I need to be lifted. I just need to be lifted. I had this conversation this morning with a good friend. He's going through a battle right now, and he called me. And he said, man, I just need to be honest with you. And because I know his situation, because I have full perspective of his situation that he told me about, I said one thing to him, and it just perked him right up. One thing. Was it a wise, amazing thing? No. I just said, don't be confused. All these other unknowns right here are creating confusion. Retreat to clarity. What are we clear on? And he's like, that's what I was thinking last night at 2 in the morning. I just need to get clear. Well, he already knows what it takes to get clear. But sometimes we get so wrapped up in our circumstances, we are unable to look in the mirror and speak clearly. That's why we need the peer who is there to say, I believe in you, I love you, I believe you're on the right track. Let me give you perspective, and let me just lift you. Let me just help you get across the finish line. Okay? Final quality in a peer. They hold you accountable. They hold you accountable. This is huge. And again, most men and women, as I talk to professionals, they don't have somebody in their life. And by the way, the right peer is all three of these things. But these are three things you're looking for in a peer. That accountability. Say, hey, did you work out today? How you doing on your eating plan? You hitting your calorie goal? Are you walking? Are you exercising? I got guys in my life that'll say, hey, how's your relationship with Stacy? How you doing with your kids? I got guys in my life, I'll tell a story. It was about 6 months ago. We were all hanging out at one of my buddy's pools, and I was a little intense with my son. He did a really bonehead thing. It was a boneheaded 13-year-old thing. 13-year-olds do boneheaded things. You know what I'm talking about. And, I didn't yell at the kid. There was none of that, but I was just a little, in teaching him how boneheaded it was, I was a little rough on his spirit, a little too biting and sarcastic. And when he walked away a little defeated in the moment, I didn't see the defeat. I was embarrassed. So I embarrassed him. Not good dad stuff. Okay, we've all done it. It wasn't a good move. As he walked away, my buddy looked at me and he said, "Hey, I think you crushed his spirit right there." Oh, huge. Held me accountable, right? In that moment, that one little comment, I was able to realize that, went and got my son, pulled him aside and said, "Hey, you embarrassed me and I embarrassed you and that was wrong. Shouldn't have done that. Forgive me." It's a big deal. I don't know if you apologize to your kids regularly and tell them when you do wrong. You probably should. It's a game changer. You wouldn't believe how their spirits will respond when they see their dad do what you teach them to do and say, "Hey, I blew it here. Could have handled that better." It's a big deal. So that's a moment where I was so grateful for my friend because he rescued a bad dad moment. Why? Because he had the entree to do that, because we have that relationship. He didn't embarrass me, just a little nudge, and then I did something about it. So here's the example. So I'll go back to the marathon story. So this guy, Bill, he's training me, and I'm about 6 weeks in, and I've got a really long run. It was my longest run so far. It was a Sunday afternoon. I'd gone to church, kids fed, everybody at home, and the last thing I want to do on a Sunday afternoon is my longest run in the training. It was an hour-and-a-half run. And he said to me beforehand, he said, "This is going to challenge you mentally more than it will challenge you physically." And he's like, "There's a halfway point here. It's the longest run you've done. You're going to want to quit. If you can make it, if you can just make it 5 to 10 minutes past the halfway point, your body will kick in, and it'll kind of overpower the the mental desire to quit." So I'll never forget, I'm coming around this corner. I was out there in Leapers Fork area, and I just hit the longest hill, and I'm literally dying. And I'm asking myself, why do I work for Dave Ramsey? I can't stand that guy. Why would he challenge me to do a marathon? I hate Dave. I'm going through all these raw emotions. Why am I doing this? I'm successful. I'm in decent shape. There's no reason to be suffering. Life is too short to suffer this badly. And I'm just in a bad place. And physically, I'm probably running like this. You know what I'm talking about? Where it feels like I'm dragging 50-pound bags of concrete. Because I just went up this hill, and now I'm kind of coasting down, and I'm really ready to quit. Well, that was the halfway mark, just like he said. And I'm not kidding you. I'm looking down, and I see about a half mile away this white Suburban come around the corner and pull off the side of the road in like a screeching halt, like really quickly. So I'm thinking to myself, well, that's interesting. What's going on there? Like it's a country road. And then I see this guy pop out of the car real quick, and I'm like, is that Bill? It's all kind of hitting me, and I'm just literally like this. And I'm just dying. And I keep coming, and I get closer, and there's Bill. And he's leaning on the hood of the car with his arms crossed, and he's looking at his phone. He doesn't even see me, really. And as I get closer, he sees me, and I can see this happen. And then he starts coming towards me, and he starts yelling, "Woo! Woo!" He's just going nuts. "Go, Coleman, go! You got this, man! Woo!" And he's acting like a complete maniac and cheering like crazy. Now, let me tell you something. As this is happening, I'm like this. And I see all this happening, and I hear this, and now I'm like, I'm running by him, I pick up the pace. I'm rocking it. My whole attitude changed. My whole physiology changed because it meant so much to me that in the middle of a Sunday afternoon, in the middle of an hour-and-a-half run, there's my pal who's training me, and he knew where the halfway mark was, and he showed up for one reason. He knew that's probably where I'd want to quit. And he didn't just show up. He's going crazy. And my pace picked up, and my attitude changed. My heart was so full. And, of course, I didn't want to, slug it past him. I wanted to run and try to look good and all this kind of stuff. And I finished that run. And I'm going to tell you right now, looking back on it, the only reason I finished that run is because Bill was there at the halfway mark. Now, you find you a Bill. It only takes one. You find you a Bill in your life who's going to meet you halfway when no one else is there. Because everybody showed up. We had a bunch of family and friends show up down here the day we did the marathon. Everybody was there at the end. A lot of people came at the beginning. I want the people who show up halfway on the training runs. That's who you want. That's the difference between high achievers and the rest of the pack. They have people in their life who are invested. You're invested in them, and as a result, they invest in you, and they make the difference. All right, let's move to places. Let's move to places. So let's talk about places. So when I'm around the right people, they get me in the right places. And then when I'm in the right places, opportunities find me. So let's talk about the first place, a place to learn. A place to learn. So here's what I know, because for years and years and years, I've had the opportunity to interview some of the best and brightest leaders on the planet, and every one of them have one thing in common. They never stop learning. They never stop learning. They're always learning, and we know that leaders are learners. So if you're sitting in this room today and you're saying, listen, Ken, if you could boil down one thing for me to help me grow in my leadership, what would it be? And I'd say, never stop learning. And I'd call it a day. Because if you're not learning, guess what's happening? You're being slowly disrupted, and eventually you'll be displaced. Now, this is true for Pinnacle. It's true for any organization. It's true for a ministry. It's true for nonprofits. It's true for sports teams. If the organization itself and the leader at the top, so even on your team that you're leading, if you aren't constantly learning, somebody else is. And then we've seen this with technology in the last 10 years. Everything keeps moving this way. And so if you're not learning, then you're going to be disrupted and eventually displaced. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. So the great leaders, high performers, are always learning. What are some things that you can learn? All right, let's just list a few. Let's learn about my industry. Let's learn about cultural trends. Let's learn about technology trends. What's an area of my leadership that I have the least amount of experience in? What can I learn? You know, who can I learn from, right? This idea of what are the places. We talk about conferences all the time. You know, people are constantly going to these leadership conferences or personal growth conferences. It's a great place. A place to learn would be on the treadmill with the earbuds. This is what most people don't do. I think if you're exercising and you've got earbuds in and you've got music on, I think it's great. But I think at some point in there, you better be throwing in a podcast, which is free, by the way, right? Books on audio. At some point, there's no excuse for you to not be able to learn. You can't say, well, I don't have time to learn. Well, yes, you do. Turn Bon Jovi off, right, and listen to something else. So the idea here is that I'm constantly looking for a place to learn. Great example of this. Years ago, I had the opportunity to interview Coach K, the legendary Duke basketball coach. Listen, behind John Wooden, he's got more championships, he's got more victories than John Wooden. He's one of the greatest to ever put a whistle around his neck. Doesn't matter the sport. And I was interviewing Coach, and I asked him this question. I said, Coach, how do you continually learn? I mean, at this point in his career, he's a legend. He's an icon, Hall of Famer. He said, one of the things I do, Ken, every offseason is I usually call or I go visit a couple of young coaches in the game that I've been paying attention to. I've seen what they're doing with their program. It might be a cultural thing that I noticed on the sideline when we played them. It might be a couple of plays, might be a defensive scheme. He said, but I try to make a list of the things that I admire, and then I want to find those coaches, and then I call them up. I started laughing. I said, does it always shock these young guys? He goes, well, a lot of times it does. Can you imagine being a young coach, you're in your 30s, and you get a phone call one day from Coach K, and he says, hey, if you got 30 minutes for me, I'd like to ask you about the way you play your zone defense. It'd blow your mind. Pat Summitt did the same thing, the legendary University of Tennessee coach. She would spend time with Don Meyer, who was a Division III coach, every offseason. And she'd go to him, she'd go, this is what we struggle with this year. This is what I got coming in this year as far as personnel. And she would throw all these things at Don Meyer and get him, a guy who's not even well known at all, to pour into her. So this idea of you want to constantly be in a place, a mental place, an emotional place to say, what can I learn? Where can I learn it? Who can I learn it from? So a place to learn, a place to learn. It's really huge. Now, I've got to pull up some data here real quick. My screen went dead, so you all just be patient with me for 1 second. Next thing I want to talk about is a place to rest. Write that down. A place to rest. A place to rest. This is a place that's not in the book, but I shared it in front of 6,000 leaders in May. And the reaction in the room was such that I knew that we had a massive problem. And I had just talked about it the week before on Fox and Friends. There was an article that came out about 5 months ago in the Washington Post, and you've probably seen it or heard about it. You're going to hear a lot more about this. And it was burnout on the rise. Corporate burnout on the rise. So my producer sent me the article. I started reading it. And one of the facts in the article that was interesting is that Johnson & Johnson, it's such a big deal, burnout among CEOs, that Johnson & Johnson is coming up with a camp for CEOs, like summer camp, and getting these men and women, high-producing men and women to come to this thing and help them with burnout. And so I'm reading that, and I'm going, this doesn't make any sense. Then the World Health Organization came out 6 weeks ago, I believe, and has said that burnout is now a medical condition. Okay. Let me tell you something. Burnout is not a thing, okay? It's a feeling. It's not a fact. It's a feeling. There's no question that people feel burned out. But if you're listening to me and you feel burned out, you're looking at me and you feel burned out, I got good news. The good news is you're alive, which means you're not burned out. All of us will be burned out one day. It's the day we slip into eternity. I'm not trying to be cute. Well, when we die, we're burned out. There is no more productivity coming out of Ken. Right? Don't resuscitate me either. You know what I mean? Well, I'm done. I'm gone. Got better places to be. So if it's not burnout, what is it? So I started thinking about this, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I sketch out 5 things. I send these 5 things to my publicist, who then sends it to New York, and I'm on Fox and Friends 2 days later. Why? Because there's a lot of truth to this. They'd never heard this before. Now, they wanted me on because I was willing to say there's no such thing as burnout, and everybody uses burnout, right? So I'm kind of swimming against the stream. But I really want you to lock into what I'm saying. You're not dealing with burnout. Your team is not dealing with burnout. They're dealing with build-up. Now, this is for you high performers in the room, but it's also for the people you lead, the people you love, because this is a big deal, and this isn't going anywhere. People are going to constantly talk about burnout, and we've got to say, let's not medicate this. Let's get to the bottom of it, and then how do we fix it? So here we go. I'm going to dive into this because this is the content that I'm most excited about sharing, a place to rest, because you're going hard, and you've got to have a rhythm of rest. So let's look at this. First thing, what is the first sign of buildup? No passion for your work. No passion for your work. You have zero connection to work. You're good at it, but you don't love the work. Your heart doesn't sing when you're in the middle of it. You don't look forward to it when you're done. There's no real connection. This is what's happening. 70% of Americans, Gallup poll last year, so disengaged at work they hate their job. They hate Monday mornings. Why? Build up. No passion for the work. You got to care deeply about the work. You were designed to do something that you love. That's the first reason. Second reason, toxicity in the workplace. Toxic culture, toxic team, toxic leader. All right? I'm not going to dive deep on this. I think we all know what that means. You can be in your sweet spot, which I teach on, and you can absolutely love what you're doing. But if you can't stand the people you're around, you will eventually feel like you hate what you're doing. And you don't hate what you're doing. You hate where you're doing it. Okay? Third thing, you're overwhelmed. You got to learn how to say no. It's like drinking from a fire hydrant. It's impossible, right? You're just absolutely overwhelmed. Fourth reason for buildup, underappreciated. We know from HR studies that men and women would rather get recognition at work or some type of reward for their work over getting a salary increase. That's crazy if you think about it, but it's absolutely true. We all want to be known and felt known, okay? We want to feel as though we matter. So that's the unappreciated. The final thing is you're just bored. You're just bored. You're absolutely bored out of your mind. Again, this is the human spirit. You want to be challenged. You want new ground to take. That's the deal. We all feel like we get to something, we master it, and we start messing and fiddling around looking for something to do because we're bored. That's when you'll begin to feel buildup. So those are the 5 causes of buildup. Look for those in your own life. And what do? Well, once you know what's causing most of that, we go, okay, I might need to change my location. Doesn't mean I change my career. I may need to change my location. Or if you're leading somebody that feels that, let's look at that as a leader and go, wait, You're feeling overwhelmed? I didn't know you were overwhelmed. Why didn't you tell me you were overwhelmed? Because I didn't trust whether or not I'd get fired if I told you. So as a leader, how do you create a culture and environment where your team can talk to you about this? Now, hopefully there's no toxicity going on here, right? But when we look at the overwhelmed and someone not quite being on the right seat of the bus, that's that first and biggest category, which is no passion. So you've got to make sure that you're talking to your team and helping them understand these causes of buildup. Okay? So I'll wrap, and we're going to take some questions if we have them. What's the challenge? So when we look at a place to rest, and then I'm going to get into some specific people, places, challenges, I would tell you that everyone in this room has got to find some type of daily, weekly, monthly rest. I'm not talking about necessarily vacation. I'm talking about, okay, I'm going to spend 30 minutes at my desk, no email, whatever. That could be a place of rest. And I'm just going to sit there and think. A place of rest could be, you know what, I'm going to go for a run, or I'm going to get on the bike every evening, get away from family, everybody, and I'm just going to let my heart and brain kind of resync. For me, a place of rest is every Friday morning. I don't go in, and my show's live at 12:06 every day. I don't go in until about 10 minutes before the show. And I am sitting somewhere quiet in my neighborhood or surrounding areas. Nobody is around me. I don't have my cell phone. I'm not on my computer. I'm sitting there with a pencil and a moleskin. And I'm thinking, I'm dreaming, I'm planning, I'm assessing, whatever needs to happen in those days. And so now I've gotten into this rhythm where every Friday morning I'm looking forward to it. So by the time I get to Friday's show, I got a little extra juice because I've had time to think and rest and get away from the white noise. Your day-to-day job is essentially white noise. Doesn't mean it's not important. What I'm saying is like this all the time, right? And to step just outside of that, just for even 30 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. I always loved doing that, Brian. Made you uncomfortable, didn't it? First 2 seconds, you guys were like, oh, I see, he's illustrating quiet. Then about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds, a couple of you are like, is he going to talk? Is he freaking out? Has he lost it? The quiet makes us uncomfortable. We're so busy, we're so engaged that just that quiet makes us uncomfortable. But then if you get into a place where you practice that, it's not uncomfortable. And then you let that quiet go, and guess what you begin to hear? Your heartbeat again. You hear your heart. What's my heart telling me? That's really important. Okay, practical things. Ready? And I'm done. I want you to identify 3 people and 3 places that you need to get in proximity to. That's my challenge to you. In the next 30 days. It's a 30-day challenge. Before the day is out, and again, you don't have to do this, obviously. I'm not going to be able to check up on you. But I want you to do this little exercise. Write down 3 people and 3 places that you don't normally spend time with or in that you know will make you better, whether it's changing your perspective, giving you some new information, making new connections. I want you to identify 3 people in 3 places, and in the next 30 days, you need to be intentional to get around them, coffee, lunch, whatever, or go hang out and observe and audit something. Just sit and watch and listen and really challenge yourself. Then, for you leaders in the room, I want you to finish that exercise and then challenge your team to do the same thing. If you want to see, if you're leading a group of salespeople or customer service people, you want to see radical growth, challenge them on this proximity principle. You got the book for free, give it to them. They can get it at the library. They can buy it on Amazon, kencoleman.com, wherever. But challenge them. I've just given you 2 examples of people and places today, but challenge them. Give them some ownership and accountability to get themselves in proximity. Because here's the final thought. Proximity to the right people and the right places positions me where I need to be and propels me to where I want to be. If you're not experiencing growth in any area of your life, professionally or personally, moms, dads, health, you name it, financially, if you're stuck in an area, it's because you're not in the right proximity to people who are doing it the right way, in places where the right way is being demonstrated. So there's the thought. Big thanks to those of you tuning in out there, and for those of you in the room, you've been a great audience. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ken. So, again, what we'll do, we'll take questions here first. And so if you are in the satellite locations, if you'll email us, me, and Alfredo with any questions that you've got Let us know who's asking the question, what your question is, and the location. We'll build a queue, and then we'll rattle through and go to it. One thought I did have as Ken was talking, when you're talking about peers that will push you and lift you and hold you accountable. A lot of you that are participating with us today have either previously or are currently in our mastermind groups. That is an excellent place to find really good peers. We take you through 8 weeks through the eMyth Revisited. You are with other business owners and business leaders, and there are people in there that will push you and will lift you up and will hold you accountable. So if you haven't done that, contact see one of our offices. We'd love to get you plugged into one because it is an unbelievable place to really build that community that we've been talking about. So who has a question here? Anybody with a question for Ken in the room? Alfredo, do we have anybody showing up yet? You must have done an excellent job. I'm going to bring you the microphone, and then I'll walk it back up.
The part on the places to rest, you said that wasn't in the book. Do you plan on expanding on that, and is that a new book, or are we gonna? Where do we go to find out more about that?
That's a really good question. Yeah, so the 5 places in the book are a place to learn, and then a place to practice, a place to perform, place to grow, and where you are. And those are the 5 places, because this book is written for somebody who is not in the dream job yet. You know, this is like, I know kind of where I want to go, but I'm not sure how to get there. The place to rest came out of that story, where I was sitting at my desk one day. The producer emails me that story, and then I had a chance to speak in front of 6,000 leaders, and I thought, I only have so much time, and I gave you a really quick version of each place that I gave you today and each person. But a place to rest it's not a new book. I don't think it's that, but it's a big message, and I'm sharing that a lot on my show because of the reality of where we sit, where there's something about the rise of technology, the natural human spirit to constantly advance and grow, which is healthy. But then what happens is we're not one-dimensional people. So we've got this ambition that leads us this way, but then we've got, I got to be a dad. Like when I go home, my kids don't care that I'm on the radio. I'm not kidding you. I can come back from New York, do media. As soon as I walk in, they'll go, Dad, it was so cool to see you on TV. They say, Dad, I need help with algebra. You know, and so I'm instantly shifted to that. And so then I've got my wife and all the things, right? And so everybody in here has that. And so the idea here is the reason I brought that up is because most people don't think, how do I make sure that I'm not completely bombarded and overwhelmed and I have some perspective? Because really the reason I taught the place of rest today and I'm teaching leaders is for perspective. Because if you're like this, that white noise just kind of drowns everything out. And you don't want to be in a place as a leader, certainly, where everything has been drowned out. That's what white noise is designed for. It's kind of a good thing, but white noise drowns out all the other noises around us, and we're just kind of in this little vacuum. And as somebody who's serious about my personal growth and my purpose, that's why I'm wired. I'm wired to help people discover what were you created to do. Each person in here has a grouping of talents, things you do well. And then you have things that make your heart come alive. Well, purpose and significance in life is where those two intersect. But even if you're completely on purpose and you don't have any time to allow the head and the heart to reconnect, you can spin out of control. And we've seen it in politics. We've seen it with pastors. We've seen it with athletes. Okay? Let me tell you what's going on with Andrew Luck. I heard the Andrew Luck story, and I went, oh, he's got massive buildup. He said it at the podium. He went, my injuries and the necessary work and effort to get healthy, that's the rehab, it has taken the joy of the game away. Because he's doing all these things that are just drudgery. So now we look at him, and some people are criticizing him. I think these people are idiots. Because this is a guy who's actually doing what we as humans should be doing and saying, wait a second, what's it about? Right? Is my life more than just the game? Is my life more than just the job? And while I'm a guy who's preaching, do work that you love, do work that matters, I'm not one-dimensional, neither are you. And so that's why I talk about that. So I appreciate the question. It's not going to be another book. But when I talk about it to corporate audiences, this is the biggest thing you all face. And HR departments aren't talking about it. I don't know if they know how to talk about it. But if we just, as leaders, can look at what are the causes of buildup. Well, this person is overwhelmed and they're feeling underappreciated. Oh, that's a perfect storm. So one more practical challenge. If you got some unhappy people on your team, why don't you just take those 5 things I gave you today and go back for the next 48 hours and watch them. Do some digging with them, maybe their coworkers. And I'm telling you, in America's workplace, there is a scourge of people who are overwhelmed and underappreciated. How would I fix that, Ken? I'm going to answer your question. How do I fix that? Real easy. Let's look at what's causing the overwhelmed state. What's going on? Can we offload some of this unnecessary? Is this a lack of communication so they're feeling this way? Right? Okay, feeling like they have to do it. They don't have to do it. We haven't talked about it. You don't have to do it. Let's come up with a better process. Let's fix it. Then we look at, an attaboy and an attagirl. You know, this doesn't cost a lot of money. How about taking them to lunch? Get them a gift card to Topgolf. Say, hey, you're killing it. Leave Friday at 2. Game changer. And you got a person who's ready to quit you, now ready to fight for you. That's the difference. Yes, ma'am. It is. Let me repeat the question for those of you out there. She said, isn't creating a culture, a healthy culture, where the team can essentially communicate and feel like if they need to do something to take care of themselves, is that the game changer? And it is. Let me tell you what you do. I just mentioned some of the techniques, but where you have to start, I gave some practical examples. But where you have to start as the leader is if you haven't done this, don't beat yourself up. You get to start over. Here's what you got to do. You can't do those practical things that I mentioned unless there's trust established. People have got to trust you before they'll come to you and say, Brian, I got to tell you, I've been trying for 6 weeks. I can't keep my nose above water. I'm doing everything I can. I'm not letting it drop, but I feel like I'm going to let something drop, and I'm terrified. And when I come in on Monday morning, I'm exhausted mentally by 9:15. So before I can't do those practical things until if Brian has created an environment where I don't feel like I'm going to get fired or demoted by telling him that. So what you do is, the way to create that trust is by communicating. And I would tell you, it's just like my parenting style. I just know that sometimes I suck as a dad. So the best thing to do is tell my kids, I sucked right there. My kids, it blows their mind when I say, Dad blew it. I never had that situation before. I tell my 13-year-old son that probably 4 times a month. Never handled this before. Thought about it. Sorry. Here's how I should have handled it. Here's what we're going to do. And kid lights up. High levels of trust between my son and I. Why? Because I told him where I screw up, and I said, I'm going to fix that, and here's how I'm going to fix it. So I would start by saying, hey, don't know if you feel this way or not. I feel this way. Hear me out. I don't feel like I've created a culture and in tune so where you guys can actually speak freely. And that's on me. Still care about you. Have always cared about you. I'm not communicating my care. So here's what we're going to do. You're feeling this way, this way, this way, this way. First thing, come tell me. Come tell me. That makes for good communication anyway, so they're not telling their coworker. We got backbiting going on, and we got all this stuff coming over. Because if you're happy and you're not one of those things, and then one of your coworkers comes and tells you, all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, oh. You start to question, and then they start looking down on you as a leader. Oh, well, why would they let that happen? Well, I'm not experiencing that. You got a problem. So to your point, you have got to create trust first. Safety. Remember this, folks. These men and women working for you, you are their meal ticket. They want to make you happy so that they don't get fired because the average American's living paycheck to paycheck. Understand the unbelievable amount of anxiety it takes on somebody to just share with their leader, I'm overwhelmed. I'm bored. I like being here, but I'm not doing the right thing. That is crazy scary for someone to say to a leader because they're afraid they're going to get fired. So they'd rather fake it and be miserable and become unhealthy, all just to keep the paycheck. Yes.
Yeah. We know what you do with your Friday mornings, but what do you do with the rest of your mornings? You said that was a good question to ask.
It was a good question. Yeah, so yeah, because I have a daily rhythm too. It's a very good question. So I get up before everybody else, and so I have about 20 to 25 minutes. 6 o'clock. Yeah. I believe there are some people that can get up at 5 every day. I can't personally because of my sleep rhythm. Okay, I believe in sleep. I've interviewed sleep experts, and the key to optimal performance is good sleep. And so with my kids going to bed around 9:30, then I got to spend a little time with my wife, right? I'm usually asleep by 10:30. I like to be in bed by 10. So if I'm going to get my 8 hours, I'm trying to sleep till 6. So I get up at 6. Alarm goes off at 6. I'm up. Coffee's already made, right? So I immediately go get the coffee, and then I do Bible reading. That's just me personally. I'm not proselytizing, but I read the Bible, and then I spend time in prayer. Just a lot of times it's just quiet. Then there's specific prayer. Then after my quiet time, I have to get a quick glance of what's going on in the world. Did the world burn down while I was asleep? So I do a quick check of the news and sports because I'm a sports nut. And then, ashamed to admit this, I'm really not. I don't know why I said that. I'll check my social. You know, what happened? What happened with social? What's going on there? Is there any feedback, any really cool comments? Because early in the morning before I get into the rhythm, people will say nice things that they bought the book or they listen to the show or whatever. So I do a quick check of that. By that time, it's time for me to get the boys up. And I get the boys up, then it's full dad mode. You know what that's like. You don't? Okay. It's like herding cats, isn't it, Brian? Yeah, I got a 13 and an 11-year-old. So football bags. You see, here's what's interesting about this. I was going to say this real quick. There's something really awesome about embracing those rhythms of the day, too. You know? Like, that's my early time where, as a guy who's going to pour himself out on radio for 2 hours to people, I got to be filling myself up. So before I go to bed, I didn't mention this, before I go to bed, I read every night. I'm reading a biography or something like that. I've got to keep putting stuff in me, right? Because I got that little bit of time in the morning to get my mind and heart set. Then I'm all dad, and I got to get the boys ready and out the door. And then once I do that, then I'm in the office by 8 o'clock.
So this might be the best question asked today. This is from Dick Henson of Henson Flooring in Knoxville, Tennessee. Dick Henson wants to know, what was your time in the half marathon?
I appreciate that question. It comes with a story. I set an aggressive goal for that half marathon to break 2 hours. I remember having lunch with you, and you were a doubter, and you were right. But there's a story, brief story. I got injured at mile 6.5. Started cramping really, really bad. I guess it wasn't an injury, but started cramping. I was on pace. I think we were on a 1 hour, 58 something pace at that point. By mile 7.5, I was on a 2 hour, 10-minute pace. The cramping got worse. I started compensating for the cramping. And Brian knows this. Once you start compensating, everything else starts breaking down. I did finish. I ran the last mile, but I came in at 2:32. It was very disappointing for me. But I was injured. I did finish, and I looked like a wounded antelope the last 5 miles. I don't even know I'd call it running. I look like a 90-year-old guy running. Any other questions? These are great, by the way. Any questions about an office situation? Yeah. Okay. Well, when you talk about peers, I don't think that you can classify the people you work with. Are you the owner, operator? I thought so. So let's break. Can we do this a little Ken Coleman show real quick? Because I know what you're asking, but I think I'm going to help you ask it. Okay. Let's talk about you. Where do you want to be as a businessman? Where do you want the business to be? What are we talking about? You don't know. Okay. Can you retire? Can you walk away now? You can't. Do you have an exit strategy? Okay, great. But let me ask you about this. Is it a family business? Do you have a child that you plan to hand it to or you'd like to? And do the boys want it? Okay, so that's the exit strategy. So exit for you is death and inheritance, right? Passing the baton. That's your exit. Okay, great. But where do you want to go financially? You don't have to tell these people, but do you have a good idea where I'd like to see the company in the next 5 to 10 years? You need to. Let me ask you another question. Do you know when you'd like to hand it over? Is it before you die? Or do you say, when I die, these 3 things happen, this kid does this kid, or do you want to maybe see in the next 5 to 7 years? And if it's okay if you don't know, but these are things you need to be thinking about. How do you hand the baton? Is it before you die or when you die? I thought so. So now, what would be ideal for you, just for fun, not holding you to this? Okay, great. Let's say 58, just for the rest of the room. 58. 5 more years. We can change this, but we got to start thinking concrete, right? So we think in 5 years, I would love to hand the baton to this kid or this kid or this kid, whatever it is. I want to step out of CEO role and be founder, right? That's what you're saying. Okay. You need to be hanging out with peers that have done that or in process of doing that. Small businessmen and women, family business owners. So it's a family business, so that's parallel to you. 2, they are in the process of that plan of succession. 3, they've already done it. Now, you're going to have to dig a little bit, right? I understand that person hasn't come to top of mind, but I also know that you can get to them, right? It's the old 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon game, right? Okay, I'm going to give you 2 names. Denzel Washington and Kevin Bacon. You got to connect them 6 ways. You can get there. You can start talking to your friends and acquaintances. Hey, is that a family-owned business? Is it, really start looking. There are family-owned business. There are some conferences. There are books. There's a guy by the name of, oh my gosh, there's an older guy. I know him, and his name escapes me. Will you see me after this? And I'm going to look it up for you. And he's got a book on it. But you're not the only guy out there who has a family business. You're the founder. You're the alpha dog, and you want to hand it off. You need to be hanging out with those kind of people. I'll tell you another peer. You need to be hanging out with other just successful small business guys that are in their 50s. I don't even care if it's the same industry you're in. What industry are you in? Construction. Oh, my gosh. You ought to be, your next 6 weeks, you ought to have 6 lunches on the books with guys that run some type of construction company, or maybe they're the sub. Because you just need to hang with successful guys. They're making payroll. They're not scrapping by. And just that's who you need to be hanging out with. Because you're still 53, man. You got a strong, decade ahead of you if you wanted to. But I like the idea of trying. Let's try to get out of this CEO role by 58. But how can you grow your business so that it's there? So it's not just a family succession peer you need to be hanging out with. It's also some guys that are really killing it, small business construction companies. Let's build this thing so that 5 years from now, we've increased our revenue by 50%, right? And we see a path forward where my kids can take it to the next level. You just haven't thought about it, but doesn't mean it's not possible. But by using proximity to those kind of people, the things that you're scared of, and by the way, the thing we're most scared of is the unknown. It's the unknown. So what's the antidote to fear? Knowledge. It's not so scary. But that's who you need to be hanging out with as peers, as I taught today, not the people in your company. Because they're not stretching you. They're not thinking where you're thinking. You're Moses, right? This is the promised land. Yeah.
All right, let's give a hand to Ken. Thank you, sir. Thank you all for being here, both in the room and at our various locations. I will remind you or put this out there for you. At the end of September, we're going to be doing another one of these, and it's going to be a panel discussion on cybersecurity. So we're going to have one of our internal information security people here to talk about all the crazy, awful, terrible things that we see from our perspective. We're going to have somebody from our insurance area talking about what that looks like and how do you insure it and what are the conversations you need to have about that. And then also have somebody here from the FBI just to give you an update on what are all the crazy things that they are seeing and all those types of things. So I believe that September 24th, we'll send another invitation out, but email your financial advisor and ask questions if you want to make sure you're on the list for that. You'll also get a survey later this afternoon. We just want to know what you think about the content. We want to know what you think about these series, and we want to know what you want to learn about. So as we continue to build these out and do more of these, we want to know who do you want to hear from, what are the things you want to talk about, what is most helpful to you all as business owners and business leaders to be better at what you do. So thank you all for being here. Be sure to grab some snacks and food, and hopefully we'll see you back next month. Have a great day.